All right. My name is Ryan Aversa, and I am here with Tyler Cameron, a second year finance major here at the University of Florida. And I'm going to be asking Tyler a couple questions revolving around my 8A hypothesis test. So, Tyler, my hypothesis revolves around the implementation of non lethal weapon practice within law enforcement and jobs alike. There's been a lot of different issues in our world recently that have revolved around the use of lethal weaponry and non-lethal weaponry. So it's definitely a big opportunity in the world. So just to start it off, on the more non-lethal side, do you think that cops handle situations correctly with lethal weapons when really a lethal weapon isn't needed at all?
I think that's a shady area. It's hard to say that as a whole because there are instances where cops do use it correctly, and then there are instances when cops don't use it correctly. But the thing is you have to think in the cop's perspective. If someone is reaching into their pocket and pulls out what looks to be a gun, that cop has, I think it's less than a second to decide whether or not to pull the trigger. So it's a fine line, and it's a hard thing to generalize like that, I think.
Yeah, it's tough to decipher in scenarios, but do you think that if lethal weaponry continues, do you think maybe more training is needed, maybe more on the mental side, or maybe more on just the uses of guns?
Yeah, additional training is never a bad thing. I think. It's again back to that point. It's very tough to train to have an instant reflex like that. But yeah, I think more training regarding psychological stuff. Making sure people are okay and fit to use lethal weapons and all that stuff would definitely benefit people.
So it definitely just comes down to more individual.
Yeah.
So, hitting the non-lethal points, do you think there are benefits to non-lethal practice?
Definitely. I think, I don't think it should be a replacement. I think cops should have, real guns if the situation results in them needing actual guns. I think they should still carry that. But as a first resort, having a, weapon that is non-lethal would definitely be a preference for me.
So yeah, it's more look at the contingency viewpoint of things and try to look at the scenario before you actually make a decision on what you're going to do.
Exactly.
Okay, it's a very valid point. Can you see the public as a whole getting behind a non-lethal movement?
I think the public would definitely be for that. I think, it could be skewed a little bit. A lot of people, if there's a wrongful death, people attack the guns and stuff. So I think it would be useful in part, but I also think it would be dangerous for, Second Amendment rights, because they might use something like this as a reason to ban guns, which I'm completely against.
Okay, yeah, no, it's been one of multiple issues that have been revolving around the use of gun force in our world, so it's definitely something valid to talk about. Say cops do adopt a strong use of non-lethal weapons, do you think you would see a difference in how the public looks at law enforcement?
Well, I'd hope so. The thing is, I understand cops are pretty scrutinized today, which is unfortunate. Hopefully, if, there were less deaths as a whole, people would start to stand by cops instead of scrutinizing them and making them the enemy.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that would help. It's definitely a good direction.
Okay, yeah, definitely a good direction to take with how they've just been viewed recently and with all the issues going on. It's been hard for a lot of people to stand by them, so I can agree with you there. I would hope they would stand next to them. Do you think, say the movement is successful, do you think maybe the public would begin to start carrying around non-lethal weapons? Would you see people reverting away from having their certifications to hold handguns?
Well, I hope not. You know, the reason that we have the right to bear arms at the end of the day is to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. Now, that's something that's in the Constitution. That's in the Bill of Rights, rather.
Yeah.
That's the reason we have guns. That's the root reason. And I think taking away, if people walked away from something like that, I think it would be dangerous as a whole for, the big picture in the future, because, it's again our, right, and it's a right for us to make sure that our government acts in accordance with what it's supposed to do. So
Yeah.
I'd hope that would never deter people from owning guns.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely a very good point. Now, still going towards the movement of having just non-lethals, a lot of law enforcement companies would save a lot of money, because lethal weapons are very expensive. Assault rifles, handguns, like, they're not cheap. A lot of budgeting goes towards these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think maybe we could move towards less lethal weapons, more non-lethal, and then implement money elsewhere?
Well, that's tough. I think, again, going back to what I said earlier, I think every cop should have a lethal weapon on his or her person at all times.
Yeah.
I think this is an addition, and I think it would actually cost more money, but with the amount of lives it saves and the amount of situations that it avoids, I think it would be beneficial and worth the extra cost.
Okay, yeah, no. Obviously, like, the main goal is to be saving lives, so that is 100% a good point. So, say the cops begin a movement where non-lethal is their first go, second go, and third go, and then maybe the fourth time they start to think about lethal.
Mm-hmm.
You're on the streets, do you feel safe?
Yeah, I'd feel safe, but at the end of the day, I'm not a person that would ever really end up in a situation like that. I like to believe that a cop who's taken many oaths to, serve us and has had extensive training, I have to believe that cops are really there for the good of us. So, I don't feel any more or less safe knowing that, if a cop was, needed, ever came to the situation where a gun was pulled, I don't think I'd feel less or more safe in a situation like that.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's definitely an opinionated question, so very good stance. Do you maybe, so say non-lethal weapons are still moving through and they're the number one priority, do you see violence increasing? Do you see violence decreasing? Where is it going from there? Because now these criminals know, like, cops, they're going to be using non-lethals first.
That's a good question, and I really don't know. It depends on how, what kind of non-lethal weapon you're talking about. If it's a non-lethal weapon that will immobilize a person, say, or if it's a non-lethal weapon that just hurts them and they can continue, say they were, it was a firefight between cops and, criminals. If the non-lethal weapon is something that immobilizes people, then that's a different story compared to people, a non-lethal weapon that would just maybe hurt them, but they'd still be able to, shoot back or something.
So do you maybe see a more, or I should say, would you lean more towards, like, a new ballistic that completely immobilizes someone without doing lethal fatality?
I think that's an interesting perspective. I think it'd be more, cost efficient, and I would support it if it was a, ballistic bullet, say there was, kind of like rubber bullets or whatever, that were able to be fired from, like, a 9mm standard handgun. That'd be, a more cheaper, effective way to do things, and I think something like that would do the job in regards to immobilizing somebody, but not fatally injuring them, fatally wounding them.
Yeah, okay, no, I definitely agree with that. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. I really appreciate it.
No problem.